Okay, saying that Mashima is the best mangaka is a bit of an exaggeration. But I'm not exaggerating when I'm saying that he is easily one of the most talented mangaka of all time. I mean, having a series in the top 33 ever in terms of sales counts for something. And the reason that he is so successful is because of the 4 simple steps he follows to create his story arcs. With these, Mashima succeeds in places that industry titans like Oda and Togashi sometimes struggle in, those being clarity and simplicity. I mean, if you've seen Dressrosa or the Chimera Ant arc, you can understand that once the cast gets pretty big, it's hard to stay on top of things, and Fairy Tail started with a big cast. And yeah, obviously there are a ton of issues with Fairy Tail in general. That's going to be a topic for another video, and I'm not saying that the series is better than One Piece or anything like that. What I am saying is that despite all the criticism he receives, Mashima is an immensely talented writer who makes stories that are simple, approachable, and which always leave you appreciating characters more than when they started. Currently, I'm working on a mega review for Fairy Tail like I did for One Piece, Demon Slayer, Naruto, and Solo Leveling, and I'm about 120 pages of script into it, slowly losing my sanity with every word I write, so, subscribe so you don't miss that when it comes out. But while I'm working on that, I wanted to make a few separate videos discussing some of my thoughts along the way about things that I think are underappreciated about the series. Because to a lot of people, Fairy Tail is just a joke, and I get why, but I think that there's a lot of greatness underneath that as well. But for this video, I really wanted to focus on how Mashima creates arcs and characters based on magic, all by following 4 very simple steps. I'm going to be talking about the Deliora arc as an example here because it's early on enough and avoids any real spoilers, but just know this applies to almost every arc in the series which revolves around a specific cast member. So, with that said, step 1 is defining magic. Before anything, Mashima selects a type of magic to build a character around. In this example, we'll be talking about ice magic. Once that type has been established, we need to break it down thematically and start asking questions. What is ice symbolic of? Well, ice can refer to cold, both emotional or physical. Ice is rigid and cool, but it can be melted into water, and water means life. Ice is tied to winter and death. Being frozen in ice or frozen in time are often associated with each other, and being frozen can mean the inability to progress or move. But how can we tie these ideas into a character? Well, in this case, we can make Gray someone who is cool, but hesitant to connect to others. However, once he warms up to them, he's a real softie. And we can also tie him to this idea of death or loss in some way as well. Now, how is he going to use that ice? Well, Gray has Ice Maker magic. This allows him to create frozen objects, and Gray tends to make things like swords, shields, walls, lances, static items that don't move but which can be used to protect the ones that he cares about or empower him to take down bigger threats. Okay, so he's creating things. What do those things represent, and can we tie them to the theme of ice that we established? Well, if his items don't move, we can tie that to the idea of being frozen and unable to move forward. And now if we tie all of that together, we have an outline for a character who had someone die in their past, who can't move past it for some reason, and as a result, he is cold and hesitant to let others in. Once he does though, he finds life in those characters and would do anything to protect them. We can keep going with this as we say, what is the opposite of ice? Fire. And maybe there's a fire wizard that he has a rivalry of some kind with, etc., etc. It's as deep as you want to make it by asking more and more questions. But that leads us to step 2, creating an origin, and step 3, adjusting the outlook. Now, am I cheating by combining these 2 steps? Absolutely. But these are ideas which are kind of intertwined. While fleshing out one, you're going to develop the other, and you'll develop kind of a seesaw, where once you fill in one object, the other one will be ready to have more fleshed out as well. You'll see what I mean as I start describing them. Now that we have an idea for who Gray is, we can start to imagine an origin story for him. This is where we can flesh out ideas from earlier and convert them into elements of his past. However, in exploring someone's past, we are almost always going to be introduced to other people with their own outlooks on those events as well. And that's what I mean when I said those steps overlap each other. These side characters are going to be experiencing a lot of the same events as Gray, and it leaves us with 2 questions. 1, what is Gray's backstory? And 2, How and why will the side characters deal with these themes and events differently? So let's take a look. Years ago, Gray's village was attacked and destroyed by the demon Deliora. Gray vows to kill that demon one day and becomes a student of the master ice wizard to learn ice make magic. Along with Gray, there's another disciple named Lion who's obsessed with the idea of surpassing and becoming a great wizard in his own right. We are barely into it, and already we have 2 more ice wizards, and we can begin to ask all of those questions from earlier again to establish their characters, though we don't need to be as thorough as they are side characters. For Lion, we have someone who is cold and disconnected. We see him disregarding Ur's emotion by saying things like, "I'm not a replacement for your dead daughter." Kind of a dick move. Meanwhile, will be frozen in her past because of that dead daughter. However, she uses the coldness of that moment as inspiration to give other children's lives warmth. Gray and Lion continue to train under for a while, but Gray the entire time complains about not learning real offensive magic. But then, one day he hears a rumor that Deliora is nearby. Killing this demon is all that he cared about, so he tells that he is going to go fight it, and he even goes so far as to say that if he dies, it's because she failed to teach him real magic. But of course, isn't gonna let him go do this by himself, so she and Lion follow, and in the end, she needs to sacrifice herself to seal Deliora in an iced shell. This spell basically kills the user, transforming them into ice, which will freeze the target forever. The whole scene is remembering her daughter and not allowing her disciples to die young like she had. However, in sacrificing herself, she freezes time in some ways for both of her disciples. And that comes into play as we look at their magic. Both of these characters' entire lives would be dictated by this moment, and they would never look past it. Put simply, they are emotionally frozen at this point in their lives. And obviously that is in line with ice magic. But where we get a little bit more interesting is that they each use maker magic. As explains it, this is the ultimate form of magic for self-expression, and the way that these two choose to make their ice is completely different. And in each case, it comes back to how they deal with the trauma of her sacrifice. In Gray's case, he completely blames himself for his master's death, and he doesn't believe that he is worthy of redemption. He's the one that led her out there, and he's the reason she had to die, right? Because of that, he doesn't want to stop experiencing that guilt. He wants to stew in that feeling because he thinks it's what he deserves. And we already talked about how he makes his ice. They are static items. They are things that don't move, just like he doesn't want to move emotionally from where he is. On the other hand, Lion becomes obsessed with finding another path forward. He wanted to surpass and now that she's gone, he is actively searching for a new way to prove himself so that he can move on with his life. He is still obsessed with Ur's death, but he's not trying to sit in those feelings. So when he uses Ice Maker magic, he creates living, dynamic forms. Tigers, eagles, dragons, apes, things that are not stuck where they are created. But now we have a well-defined main character and a side character, both with motivations stemming from the same place. How do we turn those elements into a proper arc for the story? Well, that is where the next step comes in. Step 4, preying on trauma. This is all about taking the characters' defining moments that we established in their origin and asking how we can turn this situation against them. And we're doing it for 2 reasons. Firstly, we can exploit it to create an obstacle that they need to overcome. And second, once they do overcome that obstacle, they can begin healing and growing as people. This is where the final important member of this arc comes into play, that being Ultir. The short version is, believed that her daughter had died, but it turns out she didn't for reasons which are explored later in the story. And obviously her false death being the reason for taking on disciples and ultimately leading Gray and Lion down their paths has a ton of implications thematically. But for now, she is disguising herself as an old man named Zalti. In this form, she approaches Lion and suggests that he can bring Deliora to an island called Galuna, and here he would be able to melt Ur's ice and kill the demon himself, thus proving that he has surpassed his master. In reality, Ultir knows that Lion isn't strong enough to kill Deliora, and is simply using him to melt the ice so that she can take control of the demon. And in doing so, she also pits Lion against Gray, who is trying to preserve the shell around Deliora. And that's the core of the arc, right? Lion is trying to free Deliora on Galuna, and Gray needs to find a way to stop him. All the while, these two disciples are being pitted against each other by their master's daughter, Ultir. You take those elements, you add in a few side characters for flavor, like maybe a tribe that has a curse, which we play off for comedic effect, a couple wizards working for Lion who build out the battles for the arc, and poof, suddenly we have a fully developed story arc that has intrinsic emotional weight and significance to our characters. But it goes one step further. Everything comes back to magic, and what kind of magic does Ultir have? The Arc of Time. Put simply, it allows her to control the time of an object, rewinding it, fast-forwarding it, or freezing it. In a practical sense, we see her using this to attack Natsu with a crystal ball, but on a thematic level, this arc is all about her manipulating two wizards who are frozen in time, and isn't that perfect? And this works for just about every character-driven arc in Fairy Tail. Urza's magic is the ability to equip armor. Why does she need to wear armor? Because she feels like she has to protect herself. Where did that feeling come from? She was tortured as a slave. How was she being used as a slave? To build a tower. Who else was there? A bunch of kids and Jalal. Turn that trauma around, boom, Jalal is the big bad who is trying to build that tower in the modern age. And that's the Tower of Heaven arc. Or we could look at Lucy's magic, which is all about summoning celestial spirit friends to fight for her. Why are friends so important to Lucy? Because she grew up feeling isolated because her dad neglected her. Spin that around, her dad is now paying Phantom Lord to hunt down her friends and bring her back home. It is such a quick and effective way to develop arcs and create characters in a symbiotic way, and all of it stems from the core part of what makes this world so special. It's magic. So, is Fairy Tail the perfect story that never does anything wrong? Absolutely not. However, I think Mashima's ability to take the appeal of his world, the magic, and then spin each form of that magic into its own web of characters with their own story arcs and themes to explore is genuinely something magical in and of itself. And I hope that I was able to convince you that Fairy Tail is more than just the joke of the series that so many people think it is, because if you give it a chance, there's so many amazing elements to it. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed and that you are looking forward to the full video's release. If you are, leave a like and subscribe, and until next time, remember to stay excellent.